Someone in your group just stopped breathing, not in a hospital, not with a doctor standing over them, right there, on the ground, in front of everyone. Maybe it was a hunting injury that got infected, maybe it was childbirth, maybe they were just old, and old age 40,000 years ago meant something very different than it means now. And here's the problem. You don't have a phone to call anyone. You don't have a funeral home. You don't have 3 days to process it while someone else handles the details. You have a body, a group of maybe 15 to 30 people who are now looking at you, and a decision that has to get made in the next few hours. Today, when someone dies, we outsource almost everything. A funeral home takes the body, a priest or officiant handles the words. We put on black, we sit in rows, we cry if we need to, and then someone else deals with the logistics. Death for most of us is something that happens somewhere else, to be dealt with by professionals. For most of human history, that separation didn't exist. The group was the funeral home, and what they chose to do with that body tells us something we didn't expect. That grief, ritual, and the idea of an afterlife might be some of the oldest technology our species ever built. So let's start with the basic problem. Why bury a body at all? From a purely practical standpoint, burial makes sense. A dead body attracts scavengers. It attracts disease. In a world with hyenas, leopards, and other predators already circling your camp, a corpse lying around is a 5-alarm signal that says, easy meal, and there might be more where that came from. So the simplest explanation is that early humans buried their dead the same way they buried food scraps, to keep the camp safe. But that explanation falls apart almost immediately once you look at the actual graves. In the Levant, in what's now northern Israel, archaeologists have found some of the oldest deliberate human burials on Earth, at sites called Kafse, Schul, and more recently, Shanidar Cave. These graves date back somewhere between 100,000 and 110,000 years ago, and the bodies inside them aren't just dumped and covered, they're positioned. Curled on their side, knees drawn up toward the chest, arms folded in. That's not how a body falls when you're getting rid of it. That's a position someone chose. And next to those bodies, grave goods, chunks of red ochre pigment, animal bones, stone tools placed deliberately alongside the dead. You don't hand someone a tool for the trip if you think the trip is nothing. Here's the part that should stop you. At Shanidar Cave, researchers found evidence that both early Homo sapiens and Neanderthals were doing this, around the same time, in the same region, using nearly identical burial positions. Two different human species, independently, or maybe not independently, arriving at the same conclusion. When someone dies, you don't just leave them, you do something. Now let's talk about Shanidar Cave and the mountains of Iraqi Kurdistan, because this is where the story gets genuinely strange. In the 1950s, an archaeologist named Ralph Selecki was excavating there and found the remains of 10 Neanderthals, men, women, and children, some clustered tightly together. Around one skeleton, known as Shanidar 4, he found dense clumps of ancient pollen. His conclusion, which made headlines around the world, was that this Neanderthal had been buried on a bed of flowers. Not just buried, mourned, sent off with something beautiful. For decades, that single detail rewired how the world saw Neanderthals. Before Shanidar, the popular image was a dumb, hunched brute who barely qualified as human. After Shanidar, that image cracked. If a Neanderthal could kneel beside a dead friend and lay flowers over the body, then whatever was happening in that skull wasn't so different from what happens in yours. But here's the twist, and it's a good one. Later researchers went back and looked closer at that pollen, and some of them think it wasn't flowers at all. It might have come from solitary bees, nesting in the soil right where the body was buried, completely unrelated to any funeral. The flower burial might be one of archaeology's most famous cases of finding a beautiful story where there might have only been an accident of nature. And yet, and this is the part people miss, even if the flowers were bees, the burial itself wasn't in question. Shanidar 4 was still deliberately placed in the ground, in a channel that had been intentionally dug deeper to hold the body. The flowers might be a myth, the grief might not be. So what actually happened, physically, when someone in the group died? First, the body had to be dealt with fast. No embalming, no refrigeration, which meant a decision within hours, sometimes less. Second, someone had to decide where. Digging a grave with stone tools and bare hands in hard ground is exhausting work, which tells you the group considered it worth the effort, instead of just walking away and starting a new camp, which would have been far easier. And third, someone had to decide what the body took with it. This is where things get personal. At a site called Sungir, in what's now Russia, archaeologists found the graves of 2 children, buried head to head, covered in an almost unbelievable number of hand-carved ivory beads. By some estimates, thousands of them per burial. Each bead would have taken real time to make. That's not a quick goodbye. That's a group pouring days, maybe weeks, of collective labor into sending 2 children into to the ground properly. Now, think about what that means for the group left behind. Every one of those beads is time not spent hunting, not spent gathering, not spent doing anything that keeps the living alive. In a world where every single hour mattered for survival, someone looked at a dead child and decided this mattered more. That's the real mystery here. Not whether ancient humans buried their dead. We know they did. The mystery is why a species fighting for survival every single day would spend scarce time, tools, and resources on people who could no longer benefit from any of it. And the answer might be that burial was never really for the dead. It was for everyone still breathing. Think about what a death actually does to a small group of 20 or 30 people who depend on each other completely. It's not just a loss of one person, it's a fracture in the entire social structure. Skills disappear, trust gets shaken, fear moves in. If this person died, what killed them? And are the rest of us next? A group that doesn't process that fear together can fall apart from the inside just as easily as from a predator outside the cave. A ritual gives that chaos a shape. Everyone gathers. Everyone does the same actions, in the same order, the body goes into the ground a certain way, facing a certain direction, holding certain objects, and when it's done, the group has done something together instead of just falling into disorganized grief and panic. That shared structure is, in a very real sense, an early form of social glue. The same instinct that today makes us stand together in black clothes and say the same words at the same funeral. There's also the question of what came after, the story part. Every culture we have any record of has some belief about where the dead go. A person doesn't just vanish, something continues, and the grave goods hint that this belief might be almost as old as burial itself. Why give a body tools and ornaments unless some part of the group believed those objects would still be needed somewhere? We can't ask a Neanderthal what they believed happened after death. We'll never have that answer, but we can look at the ground they dug, the ochre they scattered, the beads they carved for two dead children, and see the outline of an idea that death wasn't an ending to simply walk away from. It was an event that demanded a response. So here's the full timeline. Around 120,000 years ago, in the Levant, two different human species start burying their dead within the same general window of time, using strikingly similar positions. Around 70,000 years ago, in the mountains of what's now Iraq, a Neanderthal group digs a channel into a cave floor and lowers a body into it. Flowers or no flowers. And by roughly 34,000 years ago, in the cold plains of what's now Russia, a community spends what might be weeks of collective effort covering two dead children and thousands of hand-carved beads. None of those groups had writing, none of them had religion the way we'd recognize it today, but every one of them looked at death and decided it needed ceremony, it needed care, it needed something more than just walking away. That instinct never left us. It's the same one that makes you go quiet in a cemetery, the same one that makes you show up to a funeral even when you don't know what to say, the same one that makes losing someone feel like it demands something from you, even when there's nothing practical left to do. We didn't invent grief, we inherited it, from people standing in caves tens of thousands of years ago, looking down at a body and deciding that this, out of everything, was worth stopping for.